Can they hear us online?
Oh, yeah.
If you can hear? Okay.
Now we can.
Excellent. All right.
Okay.
Now we can hear you as well.
It's
Dorsal faces. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Dorsal needs to turn down.
Mayor Banska, can you hear me okay now?
Yep, we can hear you. Yes. All right. Well, you have the introductions of and roll call of those of us around the table, but we have lovely people in the audience today. So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves so we know who's here.
So let's start with our guest speakers over here.
My name is Tim Walter and I'm with the King County Housing Authority.
I'm Andrew Calkins with the King County Housing Authority as well.
Lord Roloff, City of Tukwila.
Marina Hanson, City of Kent. Sarah Bridgeford, City of Federal Way.
Cheney Scotson, City of Federal Way.
Josh Steiner, City of Auburn.
Excellent.
And
And
online.
online, do we have any guests online?
Hi, Matt Torpy, City of Maple Valley.
Wow.
That was pretty cool.
That was pretty cool.
Denise Lathrop, City of Des Moines.
Anna Bondmiller, City of Renton staff.
Hi.
Kristen Holdsworth, City of Kent staff.
Michaela Daffern, King County staff.
All right. We have quite the group today on a beautiful September Friday. And of course, we have the wonderful. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Claire Goodwin. I'm the executive manager for SKHHP. And joining me in the back, running tech is Dorsal Plants Program Coordinator.
All right. We'll move on to public comment. This is the time on the agenda for public comment. If you would like to make a comment, please use the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen. You'll have 3 minutes to make your remarks. Please state your name and city of residence for the record. Dorsal, is there anyone online that would like to speak?
Yes, ma'am. We have Ben Taylor.
Excellent. And is that door shut?
Yeah.
For it to be a public meeting, we have to have it open because it's badged entry. Oh, sorry. Things you would know.
Yeah.
Because I do not want to get the OPMA people upset with me. Last thing I want to do. Thank you. All right, Ben.
Hi there. Hello, Mayor Backus, members of the executive board, staff, and everyone else in the audience. Thanks for allowing me to come here and talk today. My name is Ben Taylor. I work in government affairs at the Master Builders Association of King and Snow. I'm really sorry to have to call into the one quarterly meeting, but unfortunately I'm stuck at home isolating with COVID. But stuck at home is what I hope you won't be on the morning of October 19th. Because I would love for everyone here to attend the Master Builder Association's annual Housing Solutions Breakfast this year at the Maidenbauer Center in Bellevue. As I'm sure you all know, one of our biggest focuses this year has been on permitting reform and efficiency. And in that vein, we're very excited to announce that Senator Mark Mullet will be our keynote speaker, followed by a panel of local mayors, including our esteemed chair, Mayor Backus, as well as North Bend Mayor McFarland and Mill Creek Mayor Brian Holtzclaw. We also just got Ken Klein, Snohomish executive, as the panel's moderator as well. So excited to announce that. The event will be comped for staff and elected officials. If you want to attend, all you need to do is let me know. My email is btaylor@mbaks.com or shoot an email to events@mbaks.com. We'll register you from your city email address. We can comp you. And if you have any questions, give me an email. And I really hope you guys accept the invitation, and I'll see you there. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ben. I love the shirt too, by the way.
Thank you.
That is awesome.
Madam Chair, can he put his information in the chat, please, or can somebody put it in so we can get his email?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Ben, are you able to put your contact information in the chat?
I sure can. I'll do that right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I hope you're better soon.
Thank you.
Anyone else online, Dorsal?
No, Mayor.
All right. Is there anyone in the room that would like to provide public comment? It does not appear so, so we will move on to the approval of the August 18th, 2023 minutes. Is there a motion? Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second? Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the approval of the August 18th, 2023 minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Motion carries unanimously. All right, we will move on to item 4, briefings. And the first one is our King County Housing Authority Workforce Housing Strategy. And today we will have the opportunity to hear from KCHA, one of the region's experts on maintaining long-term affordability and permanently preserving affordable housing through acquisitions and rehabilitation. This will be the first in a 2-part series where we will be able to learn about the background and current process. Claire, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So Andrew Calkins, Director of Policy and Intergovernmental Affairs, and Tim Walter, Senior Director for Asset Management and Develop, are joining us here today in person. So KCHA will be reviewing the process that they use to preserve affordable housing properties in South King County using their workforce housing strategy. So as Mayor mentioned, this is part of a part of the preservation conversation that we are just now starting with the board. So I invited Andrew and Tim to talk with you as one of the largest players in the region in securing long-term affordability and preservation affordability through property acquisition and rehab. So today's presentation will be the first of a 2-part series, with today's focusing on an overview of their work and projects in South King County and some of the challenges and opportunities for us to think about. So the second part of this series is slated for November, and we'll focus on how they finance the preservation work, which has implications for us as we begin to explore funding preservation projects and consider potential sub-regional preservation strategies. So with that, I will turn it over to Andrew and Tim. Thanks. And let me pull up their slides. Okay. Screen for you. So you just use the arrow for advancing.
Thanks for the nice introduction, Claire and Mayor Backus, and for the invitation to join you all. As Claire mentioned, we're really just excited about the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we've been doing across the region over the last few decades in the kind of acquisition and preservation space. Really want to talk a little just today about kind of what the model looks like from a conceptual level, spend hopefully that time in November on more of the financing side. Just a little outline of where we'll go today. Have about 30 minutes, like for it to be somewhat interactive. So if you have questions along the way, feel free to chime in. We'll try and get those addressed as we move through the presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about who KCHA is. I don't think we've presented in front of the SKHHP Executive Board before, so we're going to do that. Talk about some of the preservation strategies, at least how we think about them, what we've been doing in South King County, and then some of the opportunities and challenges of doing this work. A little bit of background on KCHA. We are a public housing authority, been around since 1939. In more technical terms, in Washington State, we are a municipal corporation governed by an RCW. Our specific purpose is to address affordable housing in our jurisdiction. There are about 40 housing authorities across the state. We work in King County outside of Seattle and Renton, which have their own housing authorities. A couple interesting things about housing authorities in Washington State. We're authorized to build, acquire, operate, and finance affordable housing and administer federal affordable housing programs. As part of our structure, we can issue bonds, and that's really issue bonds to finance affordable housing, and that's really a core part of what we do. We maintain a AA municipal credit rating from S&P. That's really important to keeping that work going. One thing to note that's interesting about housing authorities in Washington State is as public agencies, cities, counties, and housing authorities are actually encouraged under state law to work together to address affordable housing needs in the community. We have what's called the Housing Cooperation Law, which actually allows cities and counties to waive certain land use and development regulations when they're working specifically on a property owned by a housing authority. Just putting that in your ear for now. In terms of our agency's budget, we do receive a significant portion of funding from the federal government to operate low-income public housing and the Housing Choice Voucher Program, which used to be called Section 8. And we also receive substantial revenue from tenants paying rent at the properties that we own. And lastly, we're Moving to Work Housing Authority. This is really a designation from HUD at the federal level that gives us extra and unique abilities to streamline some of our federally assisted housing programs and also use our funding in kind of unique ways. Across all our programs, we serve over 23,000 households every night, over 55,000 people, ensuring they have a roof over their head all throughout King County. We are a large entity, kind of an older institution, been around for 80 years, large staff, big impact. I like to think about the different roles we play in the community. The one we're most known for, I think, is being an administrator of federal rental assistance programs. In many areas, the programs we administer are actually the greatest source of affordable housing support in those cities. Just to give you a sense of scale, the Housing Choice Voucher Program, or the tenant-based kind of Section 8 rental assistance program, supports or provides over $120 million per year in rental assistance to households living in South King County alone every year. So it's just really a kind of a huge program, really supporting a lot of folks in the region. We're also a large owner of housing. We own over 12,000 affordable homes across 135 properties. Usually surprises folks to know we have more housing these days in Bellevue than any other city in the county. But we still have a significant footprint in North and South King County. We also are a housing developer and are increasingly partnering with other organizations to support them in building and maintaining housing. And then we also view ourselves in the community as a social impact agent. Housing, of course, is kind of our core mission and what we do, but it's not where we stop doing the work. We invest a lot of time and energy and effort into linking our program participants to workforce development efforts, educational programs. We have a lot of programs serving people experiencing homelessness and ensuring our residents have access to resources to support their health and well-being. Just before talking about some of the preservation efforts, wanted to kind of ground us a little bit in kind of a few of our affordable housing programs. Kind of on the left part of this slide, we have our federally subsidized housing programs that we operate, which are kind of in two categories. The first is kind of your traditional public housing. We kind of refer to that as subsidized housing. This is managed by KCHA. Folks pay about 30% of their income on rent and utilities. And this program primarily serves people earning less than 30% of the area median income. So it's really addressing the needs of extremely low income folks in our community. Housing Choice Vouchers, targeting kind of a similar demographic, similar structure. The difference is that when someone's using a voucher, they can take that to any landlord in the region where they can find an affordable rent and use that to find affordable housing. And then kind of on the right side, we have this other category, which is where we'll be talking about most of today. It's our workforce housing program. And we are kind of unique when it comes to public housing authorities and having such a large portfolio of unsubsidized rental units. We have over 8,000 homes in this portfolio. Folks in this program generally are going to pay a monthly rent amount just like you would any other rental complex, except it's just going to be a much more affordable rent. And we'll talk about how we make that possible. In the workforce housing program, most of the properties there are financed with tax-exempt bonds. They don't rely on a lot of other capital sources from state or local funders. Some of the properties that have needed kind of extra rehabilitation, we have used the low-income housing tax credit program to make those possible. So the topic for today is really around what we've been doing in kind of the acquisition and preservation space. And we wanted to kind of introduce two ways that we've kind of thought about our preservation efforts in recent years, and really think about why would we want to pursue a preservation strategy in some of these different scenarios. In the first case, preservation strategies are really needed to acquire and preserve existing affordable housing. So that is, housing that is already has some sort of affordability, is involved with some sort of affordability program, and that could be a whole range of things previously funded by the state or HUD. A good example of properties we've acquired have been those that were privately owned properties that had HUD rental assistance contracts, or what are called project-based rental assistance agreements. And those, those rental assistance contracts basically are similar to a voucher or subsidized housing, that they allow someone with an extremely low income the ability to have an affordable rent where they're just paying 30% of their income on rent. And so when we acquire something like that, our goal is really to make sure we're keeping those really valuable federal rental assistance subsidies here in our community. Once they go back to DC, if someone opts out, it's very hard to get those back here in the community. So that's kind of a primary reason for pursuing that. Increasingly, this category of preservation also includes properties that have been financed under the low-income housing tax credit program that, now that we're getting to a point where some of those properties are kind of at the end of their affordability term, there's going to be more of those coming up where in certain situations, we could think about potentially wanting to acquire those if they're owned by a private owner and there's some risk of them not being affordable in the future. And then another preservation strategy that we have pursued in great scale, I would say, is acquiring existing privately owned housing around King County. I think this group is well aware that the supply of rental housing that's affordable to folks earning less than 80% of median income has really decreased over the last 10 to 15 years. There was a study done, often quoted by McKinsey a few years ago, that found that over 110,000 rental units that were affordable to lower income folks just kind of disappeared, right, in King County, and that's mostly due to rising rents. And so something we've been doing to try to counteract that is acquiring a lot of larger multifamily complexes around the region, removing them from the private rental market and trying to preserve the long-term affordability of those assets. And our goal there is really to grow affordability over time. And we do that by raising the rents only as much as our operating costs go up. So over time, we don't have a profit motive, and the property can become increasingly affordable, even if we don't have a lot of public subsidy there at all. So now I want to get into talking about some of the examples. I'll invite Tim up to talk through one example just to kind of highlight the model, and then we'll talk about some specific examples in South County.
Great, thank you, Andrew. I'd just like to reiterate what Andrew said, that we're very pleased to be here today. Obviously, housing is at the core of what we do, and in knowing that there's the support from the cities to help see this happen. Affordable housing is getting harder and harder to develop all the time. And I'll be honest with you, the sad reality of it is, as much as we want to find ways to kind of create new affordable housing, we are actually losing ground because more affordable housing is being lost through just increases in the cost of rent. And we will never get ahead of that. So the Housing Authority realized that many years ago and has tried to take action to help preserve as much of what is there that we can, while at the same time of creating what we can. And so the preservation aspect of it for us has been a very, very critical part of what we're doing. We actually now own about 3 times as much housing that is not federally subsidized as housing that is actually federally subsidized. And our workforce housing that we've tried to preserve, that we'll talk a little bit more about today, really is your typical renter demographic. Your modest income household who's looking for a nice place to live, the type of place where any of us would, feel comfortable living and safe and want to live there, that is affordable to them. And so in many ways, the private sector is a partner in that regard. There are a lot of private owners who rent housing at somewhat reasonable rents. And it is critical to maintain those relationships. But the housing authority, we've also seen where those over time, as those properties sell or get recapitalized, those rents will continue to go up. And so to the extent we can go in and acquire a property, we can't stop the increase in the costs of operating that property. They're going to continue to rise with market, whatever wages do, operating costs, utilities, but we can control the rents. We don't have to raise rents just because we can. Now, we want the properties to be there long-term, so we have to make sure that we're setting aside enough money for capital investments. And as much as we want to keep the rents as affordable as possible, we do need to raise them, to account for the fact that we want the property, to continue to be there for the long term. But we don't have to raise rents at the same rate that the market does. And so we've seen properties we're able to have them become increasingly affordable over time. And that's a theme that we'll circle back to in some of our discussion with you is, as you're evaluating what you're doing and what you're prioritizing, one of the things we'd encourage you to consider at least is, we all want more affordability today, but the reality is that comes with a huge price. And it's very, very difficult to assemble the resources necessary to do that. And one of the biggest tools that you will have, and any party will have, to preserve housing is debt. How much can you borrow? And the more you can borrow to finance the property, the less amount of other resources it's going to take, gap financing, public resources, whatever, to cover that difference. Things will never get cheaper than they are. And so anything that can be done to just acquire property today and build in affordability over time is a much more cost-effective way to go, and will over time generate more affordable housing than trying to assemble all the resources to get something right to the level of affordability we want today. Please.
So does each property, when you're talking about financing properties and keeping the rents as just for operating, do you group properties together in a portfolio and average out, or does each property stand alone on its own? Like if you get a super good deal on a 60-unit apartment complex, can you just keep that particular complex really low, or does it?
That's a great question. And there are no super deals. I think all of you in this room probably understand the concept of cap rates, or how properties are sold at a cap rate. When we started acquiring properties 30 years ago, the investment return, the cap rate on a rental property was anywhere between 9 and 12%. We could borrow money at 6%. So we could actually borrow 100% of what it was costing us to buy a property and still have essentially enough operating funds to do that. Over time, that has gone down and down and down and down. And today, kind of regardless of the markets we're looking at, whether it's over in the east side, up in the north end, in South County, cap rates are anywhere from 4.5 to 5.5. They're not that much different from one end of the county to the other. And so the amount of gap financing that we need is probably about 40% of the cost of the property is what you would need to put down just to break even, so that the rents that are being generated and the net operating income that's coming off of that property after the payment of expenses is sufficient to cover, say, a 30-year mortgage at today's rates. So that's the hugest, that's one of the biggest issues that we struggle with. And so we pool properties as a tool to take some of the properties that we've acquired in the past that have paid down some of their debt, that we can re-amortize some of that debt so they can help carry some of the debt burden. So we do it for that reason, not just from an operating cost standpoint, but more for carrying the debt. But that'll be something that you'll see, that you'll be struggling with, as you're looking at how to prioritize and work in preservation. Is debt is your biggest tool. Your net operating income is the source of revenue that comes with that business to help pay for itself, but it's not generally sufficient. And the more affordability you want, it just goes down from there. So how do you balance that? So I don't want to digress too much here because I'm mindful of the time that we have here. So we're just going to quickly show you some examples of some properties that we've acquired. So the property on your screen is called the Meadowbrook Apartments. It was in Shoreline. That was a property that we acquired back in 2010. The bottom line is the line that actually represents the rents that we charge. And the top line represents more kind of indicative market rates in the area. And it's very much the same for Meadowbrook up in Shoreline as it is for any of the properties that we've acquired in South King County. When we look at properties, a lot of times the ones we try to target as well are ones that are providing a resource to the community now. The rents, maybe the owner is providing rents that are a little bit more affordable than what's there. And so to the extent that property was sold to an institutional investor or someone else who's going to bring it up to market, that's going to impact the folks that are there. So this property was already slightly below, probably the market rents in the area. And so we knew that people there, a lot of folks could get displaced just by dint of, the property selling to, someone else. We acquired that property, but you can see over time where we've had to increase rents to cover operating expenses and our costs, but it's grown an increasingly, large, gap from where market is today. Another example, we don't have it in the packet, is a property called Auburn Square that we have here in Auburn. We bought Auburn Square back in the 1990s. If you are looking for a one-bedroom apartment, just a nice, clean, well-maintained property, good location in Auburn for a one-bedroom, you're probably going to pay $1,400 to $1,500 today, at least. Rents at Auburn Square are slightly under $1,100 right now. The two-bedroom, you're going to probably pay between $1,650 and $1,800. Our rents at Auburn Square are just around $1,200. For a three-bedroom apartment, you're probably going to pay somewhere around $2,100, $2,200, $2,300 in Auburn. Our rents for a three-bedroom are just right around $1,400. So they're not subsidized, and it's still a reach for some folks. But all things being equal, they're a very, very important resource, we believe, to the community here. And that's the goal of preservation. And that's the benefit of time. When we bought that property, all those rents at the property were at market. We couldn't reduce them. But over time, we were able to, layer in some affordability. So Villages at South Station, that's another property that's in Tukwila. This property was right adjacent to the light rail station in Tukwila. One of the things that we've noticed is, or identified, is that properties that are adjacent to high capacity mass transit are the ones that are most at risk for losing affordability as those transit stations in those areas get developed. We've seen that Villages at South Station, within the first year that the station opened, rents went up 20% at the property within the first 14 months. And they had about 12 Section 8 voucher holders prior to the time the light rail station went in, and 0 within 1 year from when the light rail station. The rents went up above our payment standard, and they elected, not to rent to Section 8 voucher holders. And so we were able to go in and acquire that property. Most of what we purchase is off market. These are not for sale. We find out who the ownership is, try to, get opportunities to get in front of them, talk with them. And this is a property that we acquired. Villages at South Station, you can see now, our rents are probably about $300 or $400 below, what the market is, just in the short time that we've had that property, 6 or 7 years. The other exciting thing for us is we have over 30 Section 8 voucher holders, some of whom are VASH voucher holders. Those are folks who live in the community, but for resources like this, wouldn't be able to have a place to live that they could actually afford. It's a beautiful property. Another example is Abbey Ridge Apartments. That property in SeaTac is the closest, largest complex to the light rail station that was going in there. And so that was one, again, we tried to acquire that property ahead of the curve before the light rail station came in, and we actually utilized the low-income housing tax credit program here to kind of leverage some significant capital investments. I think some of you who've been around for a while may recognize the name Springwood. Ringwood Apartments. It's now called Birch Creek. It's up in Kent on the East Hill of Kent. This was a property that we took possession of back in 1975, actually. They did a massive renovation about 10 years ago. So it's utilized the tax credit program to do that as well. A couple other examples are Wonderland Estates, which is actually a mobile home park in Renton, and the Riverstone Apartments in Federal Way. So Riverstone is right on the border between Federal Way and Kent, and literally a stone's throw from the light rail station. This was a property where we actually reached out to the ownership as early as 2016 or 17. They didn't want to talk to us. They liked the property and they knew the light rail station was coming in and they knew they had a gem. And so, but we stayed in contact with them over 2 or 3 years and tried to work with them and finally convinced them to sell to us. And we're very, very grateful for that, because we know that the rents here already would be significantly higher than what they are since the housing authorities acquired it. Salish Place is a property right on the west side of Highline Community College. And what was unique is that we learned that there was 50 3-bedroom apartments in this community. You don't find 3-bedroom apartments anymore. If any of your building departments, you were to ask them how many apartment complexes are coming in and how many of them have 3-bedroom apartments, you could probably count the number of 3 bedrooms on one hand. And so this property also had 0 Section 8 voucher holders living there. So this was another, for us, a preservation opportunity that we deemed to be a priority to ensure not only that those 3-bedroom family size units would be a resource for the folks who live in the Des Moines community, but also folks who really needed a rent that they can afford with a voucher with their family, that it would be a resource for them as well. And Meadows on Lee Hill, which is in Auburn, that was actually an example of what Andrew was talking about. It was a property that it was a tax credit property that was done by a private or by another party. And at the end of the tax credit compliance period, they were really almost underwater. They'd not been able to reinvest in the property. And we came in and acquired that. Had we not, it likely would have been sold to a private developer who would have just ridden out the affordability covenant and then brought it to market. And that's the risk in all these properties, that, you know, we have a 30, 40, 50-year covenant. Well, I'm probably older than most anybody in the room here, but it's like I blink and deals that I was on one side of thinking, I'm not going to be here when that when the covenant rolls off. And sure enough, I'm on the other side. Often wondering who underwrote this thing anyway. So I think with that, that's some examples of property and some real reasons why we believe in preservation. I think with that, have Andrew come back up and just kind of close us out.
Any questions so far? We just have one more slide and then kind of discussion. Kind of wanted to close out the discussion today and kind of tee up 2 months from now some opportunities and challenges. First, we still think there's a significant opportunity to continue the kind of acquisition and preservation we've been working on in South King County. And we're really excited that this is kind of a top priority for SKHHP right now. South King County still has a lot of rental housing that's affordable to people earning less than 80% of area median income. I think the challenge, as Tim kind of alluded to, is that housing exists doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be easy to acquire and finance, right? That part of it is still a challenge. Another point, kind of a takeaway, is, you know, the models we talked about today really highlighted our goal of growing affordability over time. And you noticed in that last example, Meadows on Leah Hill, you know, we've been able to grow affordability now to where the 2-bedroom rentals are at 37% of area median income, right? And that's just kind of the tax credit program doing what it does best, and us being a public owner without a profit motive and just kind of carefully managing that over multiple decades. But Tim kind of started off his part of the discussion kind of speaking about the trade-off, right? If we try to get that level of affordability today, that there's a strategy for that, right? There's also kind of a longer term way of thinking about it, and we could get there over time as well. And so thinking about those trade-offs, we think is really important. There are also a lot of challenges to doing this work right now. It's getting harder, and I think it's particularly difficult right now with rising interest rates. There are limited public capital resources available for acquisition. The low income housing tax credit program is like extremely oversubscribed. Like, I don't know, I used to say 4 times over, but having been on a call yesterday, I'd say like 5 times oversubscribed, right? I mean, this is just a program with a huge demand right now. And for a lot of the properties that you want to look at acquiring and doing a rehab on, that program is absolutely essential. And so that's a real challenge that we're confronting right now. And then kind of the core challenge, which I think we'll get into next time, is just this kind of a core challenge with financing affordable housing is generating enough operating income sufficient to support the debt that you need to acquire the property and finance it. So, Tim, any kind of final thoughts on that point?
No, we'd just be happy to answer any questions, but again, I think we're gonna come back in a couple months and actually kind of talk about some of that actual financing.
Backus.
First, thank you for the presentation. It's always great to hear the great work that King County Housing Authority is doing, and thank you for your years of doing it. On some of the legislation that has been discussed in the last couple of years in Olympia, are you more supportive of, let's say, 1220 or 1110? Because I honestly had concerns over the removal of naturally occurring affordable housing and the development of 4plexes, 6plexes that may not be as affordable going in on those properties. Did KCHA take a stand on any of this, or what are your thoughts?
Great question. Yeah, so we've been following it closely. Our Association of Washington Housing Authorities supported 1110. I think from where, as we've kind of talked about it at KCHA, that was really we think there could be benefits long-term, right? But it's not going to create affordable housing today, right? And, we've continued to, highlight some of the things we're doing, and we need to continue to fund this. We need to be able to preserve some of this housing in the community. So I think it's one of those policies where we can do that. And I think we need to recognize it's not going to provide affordability on its own, right? We need to complement that kind of strategy with a lot of other investments on the capital side, on kind of other policies that we can change, and programs like what we're doing that can try to preserve some of those multifamily rentals. Of course, we're all the ones we highlighted are larger apartment communities, right? Some of what you're talking about are kind of smaller, could be single family homes or duplexes. That's not really something that we have done as much work in.
Dana. So that last point, I think that's where I know our concern was with 1110 is more in those single family residents that are either owned by someone and they're renting them out in a lot of cases to families, because to your point about the multiple bedrooms, that's one thing that we hear a lot about in Kent with a significant number of multi-generational families living in a same household. 2 bedrooms doesn't cut it when you've got 3 generations. So I think that's where our concern was, the loss of both the single family rentals, but also the ownership opportunity, because renting doesn't allow people to ever get into that place where they're building that generational wealth. And I think that's where, and so I'll be curious to see what 1110 does for affordability, because I think in South County in particular, we're going to see it probably have a more negative impact than positive impact.
Yeah. Now we're looking at ways to, so are a lot of other folks looking at ways to kind of create new ownership opportunities, specifically in South King County for folks. And certainly like the issue around single family rentals serving larger families, that's something we struggle with, right? We have a lot of voucher holders with larger families trying to find housing, and it's like that's the hardest type of housing to find, right? Sometimes you can only find it in a single family home that's older and being rented by someone, right? So yeah, a lot of different ways to address that, I think. So.
Questions from anyone online? No, okay. I don't think Sean. So question about vouchered housing. We've heard presentations of our city council has heard them in the past about the challenges of how many apply and how many vouchers there are. Has any of that improved over time? During COVID, did that benefit? Have we lost those? What's our current status?
Good question. And so I'll reiterate your first point. Last time we opened our waiting list in 2020, right before the pandemic, over 20,000 households applied and for vouchers, and we had a waiting list that we wanted to find 2,500 families for, right?
And that was in what, 2 weeks?
And that was a 2-week period, right? Yeah. So, I mean, the demand for rental assistance is just extreme. And, every time we talk to our congressional delegation, we need more vouchers, right? There were some improvements over the last few years, actually. The emergency housing voucher program brought, I think to our jurisdiction about 800 vouchers, but across King County, including Seattle, it was probably in the 1,300 range, which was the single largest, infusion of new vouchers we've ever had, right, in the history of the voucher program here. So, that was really significant. We're just kind of getting to the end of the lease up phase of that program. And I think, we're trying to tell our delegation, showing HUD, right, we can use these vouchers. This is a great program, right? We all know that. When it comes to other types of vouchers, right, the thing about the emergency housing vouchers is that they're temporary and they're going to go away, right? After someone no longer needs it, it goes back to HUD, and Congress hasn't committed any more funding. We did just get some more incremental vouchers from Congress last month, but we got 28, right? So, HUD put, Congress put a very small amount of money.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that we get larger allocations for, some specific set asides, like for our VASH vouchers, serving veterans, and that program has kind of grown steadily over time. And, we have over 1,100 vouchers in that portfolio now, but just kind of general vouchers where we have some flexibility, like to serve families, right? 28, right? So there's a lot more work that's needed, and I think haven't made enough progress, certainly.
Can I share one thing on the voucher piece? One thing that we learned is that when we have voucher holders who live in the housing authority's properties, because we lowered our screening criteria and we make it easier for them to get in, and believe they're great, landing places. Because our rents are generally below market, we don't charge a higher rent for the voucher holder. It's the same rent as we would charge other places. So the cost to our Section 8 program is incrementally lower. And we're able to house about 200 or 300 more households a year just by the fact that they're living in our housing versus someone else's housing in the same communities. So it's some of these preservation strategies have had kind of other benefits, so we never even contemplated.
That's great. There questions, or anybody in the audience as well? Hey, thank you for not just your presentation, but the great work that you are doing, regardless of how Congress thinks. I mean, for those 28 families or individuals who receive those vouchers, it's life-changing. It's just when there are so many needs in our communities, 28 is paltry, but let's never lose sight of the 28 families that it did help.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Claire, let's see, we are going to go to board business, correct?
Correct.
All right. So we're going to continue our work to develop sub-regional housing preservation strategies, which we have been talking about. And we identified those as our second highest priority for 2024. And so we'll hear from city planning staff and others on current preservation work before we break into small groups to further discuss ways to preserve housing in our community. See, when you come in person, we always do breakout.
Try to keep things interesting.
Yes, absolutely. So Claire, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I just want to also say thank you to our presenters. That was fantastic. And we do look forward to seeing you in November as well for the second part. We are back now talking about the housing preservation strategy work. We started that conversation with a survey at the last meeting. So wanted to bring this back to continue the discussion. So there are 3 parts to this agenda item today, and Chair Backus alluded to it a little bit, but first we're going to hear from planners and other staff representing SKIP member jurisdictions. They are going to be talking about these 3 items listed on the slide. So I asked them a little bit about, what are the biggest identified issues or concerns regarding the preservation of affordable housing in your jurisdiction? How would you describe the need in your jurisdiction for affordable housing preservation? What is the problem that needs to be solved? So that's a similar question to what you got on your survey as well. And then any preservation policies your jurisdiction has implemented. And then are there any preservation policies your jurisdiction is considering, maybe discussing, or that are forthcoming? So part of why we invited everyone today to start this conversation with you all is through the understanding that in order for us to develop a sub-regional housing preservation strategy, it's important, I think, for every jurisdiction to kind of know what's going on in the other jurisdictions. So that's really the purpose of this, is just to hear a little bit about that from the other jurisdictions, so we can start to coalesce around a unified vision. So after we hear from them, we're going to get into small groups paired with a few jurisdictions together, along with the staff that's present in person. And we're going to go over your survey answers. So you should have hard copies of that. And then I'm going to review at a high level some of the summary findings from the survey that you all took on those housing preservation strategies. So with that, the staff were asked to present for 2 to 3 minutes. So pretty brief, pretty high level, but wanted you to just get a taste of that. So we're going to go in alphabetical order by jurisdiction. So I'm going to ask City of Auburn, Josh Steiner, to kick us off. Yeah, and everyone can come to the podium. And then maybe we'll, after Josh will be, Colleen will be representing City of Burien, and then Covington, Daphne. So thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Josh Steiner. I'm senior planner here at the City of Auburn. There's a few policies and programs I'd like to highlight, which represent some of the actions the city have taken with respect to housing preservation. One of them being the adoption of the International Property Maintenance Code, the IPMC, which is an optional element of the International Building Codes. Second, the adoption of National Healthy Housing Standards. This is a set of standards that dramatically strengthens in the bare requirements of the IPMC. Then we have the adoption of rental housing registration and licensing program. This gives us the ability to know where all the rental properties are located and how to get a hold of property owners when there are issues with maintenance and such. Since tenants are often not responsible for the condition of the property or building. And then finally, the adoption of a just cause eviction standards, which help protect tenant rights. So the above policies and programs are really all centered on the preservation of existing housing and rental housing. These programs are designed to ensure that property and buildings remain in good condition and that the living conditions of the tenants all remain above minimum standards. The dilemma is that the burden is then placed on the property owners, which can result in a higher cost to maintain that property, and that higher cost is then passed forward to the tenants, which may negatively impact their own finances and the cost of housing. On the other side, property owners may view Auburn as more difficult or potentially a more expensive place to own property, and so they sell it. If they were to sell their property, that often leads to additional rental hikes because the new owner has purchased the property at current market rate, which is likely higher than what the previous owner had paid. Since most properties carry a mortgage, the new owner's mortgage reflects the higher purchase prices, and which leads to additional risk that tenants will increase, that rents will increase in order to cover the mortgage. So yeah, basically those 4 items, and then some other considerations. As far as preservation policies that our jurisdiction is considering, I think there's a lot on the table with the periodic comprehensive plan update specifically. Our comp plan is due in 2024. And we're still kind of absorbing and digesting all the requirements from HB 1110. And then some of the other related bills around ADUs and things like that. And we are trying to find opportunities to encourage more, encourage affordable housing, the preservation of affordable housing wherever possible. And as the board mentioned earlier, there are some challenges with that. One of the, I guess, one thing that we were pursuing before 1110, but we are interested in is this unit lot subdivision code, which would allow ownership opportunities for folks in middle housing, which can kind of create opportunities to create some of that generational wealth. So, all right, thanks.
I was told I could.
Great. I'll set the skip board hat on the side and my human services hat on the side here. And so just to give you a little bit of background for Burien, an approach from human services standpoint is really from a social determinants lens. And so that's why affordable housing is deeply important to the work that we do and how we help a community do well and thrive. And because we're incredibly short-staffed, we ultimately work interdepartmentally across major cross-cutting issues and the needs that our community has. So as a human services planner, not a land use planner, we're still both really deeply concerned about access to affordable, safe, quality housing, and really work collaboratively on that work. So that's why you have me here on SKIP. I would say that the biggest identified issues and concerns for Burien is really around our larger multifamily residential properties that are aging. Much of it was constructed between 1940 and 1970, and so it's really at risk of needing to be redeveloped, and that process, as we heard earlier, that the possibility of that losing its current affordability. We lack the financial resources and capacity to purchase as a city properties and to rehab those properties. And Burien is racially and socioeconomically diverse city, as much as South County is, and Burien feels that is really feeling though the market pressures out of Seattle, and seeing that affordable housing preservation is really a crucial strategy to really mitigate the displacement and gentrification that is happening already and will continue to happen. The needs or the problem that needs to be solved is there isn't really a lot of underdeveloped or undeveloped land in Burien, so preservation existing is crucial. Properties degrade before they can be preserved. They're often picked up by groups of investors as opposed to local folks that really care about the community necessarily, and deferred maintenance isn't addressed often, and so, as I said, then properties get sold to investors with no local connection or city interest, and we lose that naturally occurring affordability. The preservation work that we've done hasn't been a ton, but we have implemented tenant protections, just cause, as was highlighted earlier, rental housing licensing and inspection program. We do have a notice of sale, so Burien requires property owners of naturally occurring affordable multifamily housing to notify the city prior to the sale of their property, and then city staff shares that information with Skip and with other developers. Burien Municipal Code provides some minor guidelines around restrictions on rent increases. And we definitely are trying to make sure that our rezone decisions have been intentional to retain our naturally occurring affordable housing and to discourage displacement. There's a number of policies that are being considered coming up in our comprehensive plan update. They're all in draft at this point, and I can send those to Claire, but most of them are just really putting a high priority on conserving and improving the existing stock that we have. And how can we do that? So it's really supporting maintenance, soundproofing, weatherization programs, rehabilitation programs, protecting the few mobile home parks that we have, recognizing that those are naturally occurring affordable housing. Really being that advocate, and I see that opportunity here as Skip member cities, is to really advocate for that additional funding at the county, federal, state, and other levels to expand not only homeownership, but really try to attract funding for acquisition and rehab. Ensuring that affordable housing is created or preserved using local public resources, making sure regulation retains its affordability over time. If those are coming due, that we're out there actively trying to seek investors that want to maintain that affordability, reducing displacement pressures in our application of our zoning regulations, prioritizing zoning changes in by increasing density in some of our areas where there have close proximity to transit and to downtown centers and corridors, and then ensuring that there's sufficient relocation plans in place. We've seen that happen where folks are displaced and there's no relocation plan available for them. So those are just a few that I jotted down in the land use hat that I'm wearing today.
Thanks, Colleen. And I should have mentioned that if there are questions for the presenters, like it's after they present, we could ask the question. So just wanted to mention that you don't have to hold it till the very end. So Covington, City of Covington, Daphne Hernandez is going to come up next. And then after Daphne, we're going to hear from Denise Lathrop from City of Des Moines, who's online. And then Cheney Skadson from City of Federal Way is here. And then Kristen Holdworth from Kent, who's also online.
So good afternoon. My name is Daphne Hernandez. I am the Associate Planner for the City of Covington. I work primarily in their long range planning, but I also work on current planning. I would say for Covington, I will start off with the question is how do you describe the need in our jurisdiction? I would say compared to other cities, it's primarily low. We are a smaller city and we are primarily single family homes. I can count on my fingers how many affordable housing units are in Covington, and that's 2. And both of them are under the multifamily tax exemption program. So some of the concerns and questions that I have been having conversations with our directors is understanding what that's going to mean when that period is over, which will be in 2026. And understanding that we can do a code update of doing an extension, but really primarily understanding and knowing what we can do, because one of those units is for our 55 and plus community. And one of our preservations that we recently did a housing needs assessment, and we learned that we have an aging community in Covington as well as a young community. So we are missing kind of the middle 20 to 30s. So understanding how we can preserve our community for our aging population. And so I think for implementation and it's just continuing to work and understand what that MFTE, because we only have 2 that really can go into it. And I think the housing authority presentation was really really great to hear, kind of learn. And I think we haven't had conversations with those developers of what they were wanting to do. So I think that having that conversation, but also trying to figure out why we don't have a lot of people apply for that MFTE, so that we can have that preservation in the future, would be kind of the biggest issue for Covington. Again, we are a smaller city. We're not quite as big as Auburn and have those issues, but I think that would be the best for us.
Hello, Denise Lathrop. I'm with the City of Des Moines Community Development. We are a little bit behind most jurisdictions, probably by 1 to 2 years in terms of our housing planning work, just due to staff capacity. We recently adopted our housing action plan just this past June. And so housing preservation was definitely one of the key elements to mitigate displacement in our city. I know that due to rising housing costs and rents, that's very challenging for our community members. We haven't really, at this point, the areas where we've implemented, we have a minor home repair program, but it's a pretty small budget that we implement, and we have for years. We also have requirements for rental house maintenance. And more recently, we are currently applying for this Commerce grant to help us with evaluating the implications of House Bill 1110, increasing our housing supply, and as part of that middle housing grant work. But beyond that, we will be looking at anti-displacement issues as part of our comprehensive plan update, and that will be sort of tag team with work we will have to be doing to address the middle housing piece. So we're really about just in the beginning stages of actually starting to take a deeper dive into our housing elements. So that is a really brief overview of where we're at in the process.
Thanks, Denise. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we missed the first maybe 30 seconds of your presentation because of some technical issues on our end.
Okay.
Would you mind telling us that about the first question about the problem you're trying to solve? That would be appreciated.
Yeah, I think for us, the biggest problem is rising housing costs in our community. We found through our housing needs assessment, I think our housing costs grew by like over 100%. It was over doubling in the last number of years. And so for us, a big piece of it is, like other South King County jurisdictions, we have an sort of naturally occurring housing stock that's considered affordable. And so looking at opportunities to reduce displacement, I think it'll be challenging with the House Bill 1110, because that may push people into maybe where a lot has a single family home. You may have people that are going to remove that single family home and put 6 units on their lot. And so what I've seen happening in Seattle is those units aren't affordable. I mean, they'll be tearing down, say, an older home and then building 6 units, but those are tending to go at market rate. And so you've lost that unit it's a 1 unit affordable for 6 sort of market rate units. So I think there'll be some challenges there.
Thank you. Thanks for going back to that point. I appreciate it. And next we have Cheney Scatson, City of Federal Way, and then Kristen Holdsworth online, City of Kent, and then Sonari Marshall represent King County.
Give me a sign for 3 minutes because I tend to do that. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Cheney Scatson, City of Federal Way. Like many South King County cities, well, actually, aside from other South King County cities, Federal Way has had the slowest residential production rate compared to all of you. So there's not only this issue of a lot of pent up demand, but our production rate isn't keeping up. And I think that it has led to a very low vacancy rate, which has not mixed very well with, like I mentioned, the increasing demand for housing. And I think that is one of the biggest issues we have around preserving affordable housing in Federal Way. If you look at like our housing need by income band, by 2044, it swoops down. There's high housing need at the very low income and high housing need at the high income. That means that our housing supply at our middle incomes is pretty good, which is a two-sided coin. It's good that we have that supply, but that also means with all the factors I mentioned earlier, it's really vulnerable to being displaced. I think that in addition to many of our cities, Federal Way is going to have a lot of big market shifts soon in terms of the soon scheduled light rail stations to be opening. So Federal Way Link Extension, although it's been delayed a couple of times, maybe will open in 2026. And then we're anticipating as well south the Tacoma Dome Link Extension, but even on the north side of the city, which will open with the Federal Way Link Extension. So those are, as we heard earlier, are areas that are at even higher risk of displacement. I think another thing worth mentioning in terms of big identified issues is Federal Way has between 8 and 10 mobile home parks, and a lot of those are located in convenient and accessible locations near the light rail station, but that also means that it's like even higher risk, I think, of displacement. Some things that the city is doing or policies that the city has implemented. So we are, thanks for the the push from King County, we are monitoring our income restricted units. We have a inclusionary zoning, so every multifamily complex that's built is required to include income restricted percentage, 5%. Now it's 4%, but so now we're monitoring that, which is a way to ensure there's lower income housing opportunities as the city grows. But the city's had that program for, I think, since the 90s. So there's a number of units have been created that way. And the policies, so the housing action plan, the city adopted a housing action plan in 2021. And one of our programs or implementation measures was to be coordinating with South King Housing and Homeless Partners. So we're here today, we're doing that, monitoring our income restricted units. Something that we identified too was requiring a notice of intent to sell of properties that are renting at expiring or are renting at either expiring covenants or our market rate, like not market rate, are naturally low income or naturally occurring affordable housing. I think going back to the first question, one issue that we have is in order to be effective in preserving housing, there's a lot of steps that need to occur and a lot of coordination. And where the city's role is I don't think well defined on how we can appropriately or effectively be a conduit to seeing the housing be preserved. And I think that's why we're here today, right, to talk about it. But I think that's a really great opportunity to focus on in terms of, across the subregion doing things at the same time and in unison. So it's easier for the partners that they can expect similar programs or similar notices or similar processes. And I think that's it. Thanks.
So next we have Kristen Holdsworth, City of Kent.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. It's a pleasure to join. Marina Hansen is also in the audience, and I'd be remiss if I did not say that her team running the CDBG program and a lot of our human services is a huge partnership. So I'm here speaking, but she can answer questions as well. We're in Kent, like much of South King County, so we're one of the last affordable places left in the region with access to quality jobs and amenities. And the displacement risk of our residents is a huge concern to us. We have, as Mayor Ralph already mentioned, a large housing stock in our single family homes, and it is some of the largest NOAA, or naturally occurring affordable housing, in the region. So Kent has between 60 to 70% of our units are just NOAA. The market is providing it naturally, which means we are at incredible risk for those units to no longer be affordable. We also are seeing a huge challenge in that the multifamily housing market is not commonly building anything larger than 3-bedroom units. And while we're excited to see the 3-bedroom units, we also need 4+ household sizes for 4-bedroom plus, so that we can house our larger households, support intergenerational living, and a lot of the cultural reasons that our community values. We have a lot of older housing stock in the region, which also makes it more affordable, but we are seeing that there's increased needs for repairs, and so we do have a home repair program as well. With our multifamily housing stock, this is especially problematic because as people are selling, we already discussed this previously, as ownership changes, there is a natural increase in seeing rents rise. The city, for a variety of reasons, wants to see these units retrofitted and renovated, but there is a cost benefit that we're seeing, and we don't directly have any tools to address the private market's costs. We do have a rental housing inspection program, which is something we're really proud of. It really ensures that the existing units in our city are meeting the basic life, healthy, and safety standards. And it's something that we're proud of because it was something that we also recognized there were a lot of residents in Kent that were afraid of repercussions if they complained. And so this is a way, over a cycle of years, all of the units in Kent will be inspected on a rotating program. I already mentioned we have our rental housing repair programs and CDBG efforts. And then we also have a extended notice of sale process for discontinued and conversions of mobile home units. And so it requires the owner to submit a relocation plan to the city that exceeds the basic state law requirements for notification. Future areas of interest in work, we're very interested in ensuring that our large average housing size is considered in the strategies and policies, as well as our multicultural nature of our residents. We're also interested in programs that help keep residents in Kent, and that's something that is especially relevant with HB 1110, the middle housing bill. When we ran the numbers and did the pro forma and talked with developers, they said, especially in a market like Kent, they need 4 units to justify demolishing an older house. And so that's something we're really concerned about, losing that existing house and having it replaced with smaller units that have newer appliances and will go for more in rent. We're also interested in strategies for rehabilitation of existing housing stock, and King County Housing Authority already mentioned, but funding is one of the hardest things that we're having, of how do we keep these units affordable. We continue to also recognize that yesterday's market rate housing is today's affordable housing. And so we're continuing to want to see that market rate housing developed in our city so that we can continue to add to that housing stock for how it goes over time.
Thanks, Kristen. All right, Sonari, you're up. And then after Sonari, we have Matt Torpy from the city of Maple Valley, who's online. And then Nicholas Matt, City of Normandy Park, and then Hannah Bondmiller, City of Renton, and then last but not least, Nora Gerloff from City of Tukwila. And Jason, I don't know if you can hear me. Is it possible when we have the folks online to turn the volume up a little bit? I'm a little hard of hearing, I'll be honest, but would love to hear it just a little louder if that's possible. So with that, Sonari, you're up.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I'm gonna wear my staff and board hat at the same time here. So King County, as you know, we have both a local government and a regional government. So we have kind of pieces of strategy in both areas. Within the local realm, the unincorporated area, similar to Burien, the unincorporated areas adjacent to Seattle is where we feel the biggest market pressure. So we've done a lot of work thinking about displacement within Skyway and White Center, or North Highline in particular.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can everybody hear back there?
Kind of. Okay. There you go. I can go there if I take my laptop.
I just saw a few people
Yeah,
going like this, so.
Okay. All right, so I'll go up here. So what I was saying is we're both a local and county wide government. So we have both that local in our backyard for unincorporated areas and the regional aspect to this. So the two unincorporated areas that are adjacent to Seattle, Skyway, West Hill, and North Highline are the areas where we worry the most about kind of market pressures raising the rents. So we spent a decent amount of time in the last few years thinking about displacement in those communities. What we know is the residents who are most likely to displaced are those with the lowest incomes. Shows are more likely to be renters or then homeowners in unincorporated King County. We also have a number of income restricted multifamily buildings that have expiring tax credits, as KCHA had mentioned, and so we try to track those as well. And so we're, I think as we put together those numbers at the countywide scale for the Affordable Housing Committee, all of the numbers in your CPPs assume that everything is maintained at its current affordability level. So this is such a huge part of the process for comprehensive planning moving forward. So some of the things we know we need to, we're really excited to be a part of this conversation as a sub-region as we think about our role within South King County in particular. And really interested, policy and program and anything that can actually help us think about this together, because I think we have a lot of shared issues. In terms of what we've been implemented so far, I think a lot of it has been more at the regional scale. So acquisition and rehab of existing income restricted housing is something we pay for with our housing finance program awards from time to time. We have been the conduit for some of the KCHA dollars for the TOD affordability that they were talking about in preservation. We also have a rather large housing repair program that kind of fills in the gaps, geographical gaps across the region. And the assessor's office implements the property tax exemption and deferral for low income homeowners as well. Some of the things we're considering right now, this is something we piloted in Skyway and North Highline and are trying to understand where else it might apply, which is community preference programs that allow folks who are within community to have the first dibs on affordable housing units within that area. So it doesn't necessarily preserve the unit, but when the unit is there, if there's new affordable housing, it helps people stay. But it has some interesting intersections with fair housing law, so we have to be careful about where we apply it. We try to support community-driven and based development, thinking a lot about equitable development right now. We're trying to determine if we can better track expiring affordable housing covenants, because we're not doing that in a very consistent way right now. And looking at opportunities, we have a program called the Interim Loan Program that folks can use for acquisition prior to development. And we're looking at ways that we might change the regulations around that program to make it more responsive to some of our displacement and preservation needs. Okay, thank you. And thanks to Michaela for together. Since I'm here, we figured I might as well say it.
And Matt, you're up. I see you online.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Claire. Matt Torpy, City of Maple Valley. I guess I'll say we're in a very similar boat to what Covington said. We're a younger city. We're a smaller city. Since our incorporation in '97, we've developed almost exclusively as detached single family with very few mixed use or multifamily until recently. That being said, I'm proud to say we did get ahead of that. A couple of years ago, we implemented new code that requires 10% of all units to be income restricted to 70% AMI or less. And right now we have over 500 units in the pipeline for development for permitting. So we're going to see at least 50 new units come on in the affordable housing category in the next couple of years. On the existing affordable housing side, we have only one apartment complex that is income restricted currently. And actually, Dorsal just informed me a couple of weeks ago that it looks like their income restriction status is expiring at the end of this year with no indication that they're going to re-up. So that's unfortunate. Regarding future affordability considerations, we are at a planning commission level just starting our housing and land use discussion for our 2024 comp plan update. We are looking into embracing the issues around 1110. And then we have addressed 1220 with our consultant, and we are looking to be able to accommodate our Department of Commerce assigned numbers. So Maple Valley looks to be in a good place for future affordability. It's just a matter of actually seeing it occur on the ground. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, that was news to me about the inclusionary zoning policy in Maple Valley.
Yeah, so and the developers are saying it's not a problem. I think a
Yeah.
lot of it has to do with when you actually look at what 70% of AMI is, it's really close to market rate currently. So
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks so much. All right, next up, we've got Nicholas. Floor is yours, and then Hannah, and then Nora.
I'm Nicholas Matz. I'm the Community Development Director at Normandy Park, the lofty title for Planning Director, and you're looking at half the staff, but you already knew that. I want to thank Councilmember Zimmerman for helping me prepare these presentation remarks today. I think he's very committed to the community that he lives in. I think it matters when you all reflect that as well. Normandy Park issues from outside looking in and inside looking out, they look different from those of neighboring municipalities. And why that is while housing preservation is a priority for Normandy Park, especially regarding our elderly residents and renters, and the community are glad to have relatively affordable rental options now and in the future. It's a past disconnect between the predominant housing stock and then the multifamily housing stock that we have on First Avenue South. But we do look at much of the city's non-senior multifamily housing is considered NOAA, and we're examining policies to address that issue of gentrification through redevelopment of this older housing stock. And I know we have a KCHHP site in Normandy Park, so I'm very aware of that. But we are anticipate that future affordable housing is more in the direction of cottage type development and ADUs, and whatever demand will exist for duplexes and lot division, of course, associated with 1110 as the market tests that for us. Our problem is that because of much of the physical real estate in Normandy Park is single family parcels characterized as being near water with views, but also not particularly near commercial and retail centers, our urban growth capacity potential for higher density is extremely limited, and our existing land area is influenced by residential market forces to a degree that may exceed per capita that of our other municipalities in SKIP. One of the outcomes we're trying to push towards is that Normandy Park residents aren't experiencing homelessness at a rate we can meaningfully detect. We haven't yet analyzed the vulnerability factors among our residents that we know can create risk for homelessness, such as poverty, unemployment, mental illness, and addiction. And if we calibrate our strategy to what we do hear from residents, it is more in the direction of friendlier code for multi-generational families in that regard. Another outcome that we're looking at, as far as housing, which responds to the affordable housing needs of residents in other municipalities, we don't have the footprint, commercial businesses or services that would especially support that versus projects being located near to the places that do. So I don't know if Eric wants to add anything, but I know he's online today. So that's where we're at.
Thanks, Nicholas.
Yeah, thank you, Nicholas. Also just wanted to say hello, everyone. Great to be here today, and looking forward to continuing to discuss, but it's been really educational so far. Normandy Park is a bit anomalous in King County, but all of the lessons and experience that your municipalities have is really valuable to us as we continue doing our unique and maybe more focused kind of planning. So thank you.
Thanks, council member. So Hannah, you're up next, and we are having slight volume issues in the room. We can't turn the volume up on our end without getting this feedback thing. So Hannah, my request to you is, it's going to be a little awkward, but just speak as loud as you feel comfortable. That's appreciated.
I will do my best, Claire. I don't normally have the most projection, but I am able to try. So thank you so much for the time today and allowing me to attend virtually. So although Renton doesn't have a preservation specific strategy, preservation has been something that has been incorporated into the city's work, both through our revitalization work in the Sunset Highlands and also through our housing action plan process. And as we've heard from many of the folks on the call today, the biggest issue that we're encountering as we're trying to advance this work is the high cost to acquire, rehabilitate, and then preserve the affordability of our older housing units. So as we've heard from KCHA and others, there is a high cost per unit for acquisition and rehabilitation. And amongst our naturally occurring affordable housing stock, the deferred maintenance is also a big issue. We've seen that, we have properties in Renton that deferring maintenance and upkeep does help keep monthly rental housing costs lower, but that is a long-term challenge to housing quality and safety, as well as increasing the cost of rehabbing those properties for preservation. So some of the things that the city of Renton has done around preservation have been less policy specific, but more program based. We've heard a number of other jurisdictions mention their home repair assistance program. The city of Renton also operates this minor home repair program. It is only available to eligible homeowners, but you can get a variety of renovation services, including adaptations for disabilities, weatherproofing, plumbing, heating, cooling, etc. And then our HRAP staff also works with King County and KCHA's major home repair and weatherization programs to leverage their resources to make larger improvements to homes where needed. Similar to other South King County jurisdictions, Renton also has a rental registration program. So we are trying to reinforce those basic health and safety standards with landlords through that program to ensure that our existing stock is of quality. One specific pilot program I wanted to mention, which was part of the city's efforts to revitalize the sunset area of the Renton Highlands. In 2018, we did a pilot demonstration project in collaboration between the city, the Renton Housing Authority, the King County Housing Authority, and Rebuilding Together Seattle. And this was an effort to do a weatherization and improvement demonstration project on a 1940s era duplex in the Sunset area. Significant improvements were made to that duplex, including an energy audit, foundation leveling, roof replacement, heat pump, foundation skirting, windows, doors, insulation. Honestly, we almost reconstructed the building from the bottom up. And so although significance were made to this unit, it was a significant cost as well. It was about $100,000 put into that duplex, with about $50,000 from RHA, $50,000 from KCHA, about $6,000 from the city of Renton, and $6,000 from our nonprofit partner. And ultimately that remained a pilot program because we weren't able to duplicate access to those resources to make it open, more available. And in terms of policies that the city is considering, one of them is to look at our multifamily tax exemption program and see if there's options to allow it to be used for rehabilitation and renovation projects. It is allowed under state statute that you can provide multifamily tax exemptions to those types of projects under certain circumstances, but it's not currently in our code. Our code really only allows for either new construction or new additions to existing buildings to be eligible. So that's something we want to look into more, and we know that some other cities across Washington have successfully used that program for rehabilitation. Also worth mentioning, I think, is an internal conversation about how we can better use rehabilitation and housing improvement funds for rental properties. As I mentioned, our home repair program is only available to homeowners at this time. And that's primarily to, ensure that the applicant is getting the benefit of that investment. But we have had some internal conversations about, could we find ways to ensure affordability in exchange for investing funds for improvement or rehabilitation into projects, specifically single family projects. Are we able to put a restrictive covenant on that property with the owner so that they can, for example, agree to not increase rent over a certain percent for a number of years? That's something we haven't completely worked out, but if we had support and technical assistance to develop out that model for our housing repair assistance program, I think it is something that we could also use to utilize additional funding that may become available for rehab or housing improvements. So that's what I have. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Hannah. And I could hear you, so that was much appreciated. And then Nora.
Nora from City of Tukwila is up and is our last presenter. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nora Gerloff from the City of Tukwila. So I think there's a lot of alignment with the issues that we've heard people talk about and Tukwila's issues, especially King County. We really felt all of those things that you were saying about naturally occurring affordable housing, 40 to 50, 60-year-old housing that is affordable, but maybe wasn't even the best quality when it was built originally. And we're seeing a lot of deterioration. You know, we have a rental housing inspection program. So we go around every 4 years and every unit in the city is inspected either by a city inspector or a hired inspector. And we paused that during COVID, of course. And then so some of these units are having 6 or 7 years before we're coming back to them. And we're seeing a huge decline in quality. So I think it's really proving that our program is maintaining the livability and quality of those units. And I think it's also requiring the owners to stay engaged and to continue to invest in those properties, which I think means that they're not deteriorating to the point where it is a no-brainer to redevelop. So I think that's, you know, it is a bit of a mixed blessing there, but I think it is keeping those units in service, especially the family size units, which we're not seeing in the new construction. We did do a housing action plan, and so we have lots of great ideas that we are going to implement, but haven't moved too much toward doing those. I'd say mobile home parks are another area where we have several that do provide very low income housing. It is valued by the residents for the community and for the greater sense of autonomy that they feel in those units as opposed to being in an apartment complex. But really the lifespan of those units is deteriorating and the redevelopment pressures are rising. So I feel that's a very endangered area. We've already seen people displaced from Seattle and moving southward, and then our residents seeing those rising rents being displaced further south. So it's sort of cascading down farther south. We do have rental, the small housing repair program, again, single family, but some of our elderly homeowners, it's what's keeping them in their houses right now. I think something that we're looking forward to is we're doing early adoption of some of those ADU reforms. There's a huge interest in our community with densification ADUs with our larger families. And so we're taking some of that low hanging fruit and adopting it now, letting people take advantage of that as we go. But we do see looking forward that we really don't have any vacant land. We are built out. So all of our redevelopment is, or all of our development is really redevelopment, whether it's going from lower density, either a couple single family houses to a larger place, or it's in mixed use commercial areas. And that's great because we are also low on our high end housing. But until we get to that point where the high end becomes our more affordable housing, we're not seeing, you know, that's a future kind of thing, but it is getting us some units for our growth targets. So lots of the same issues, lots of the same strategies, really great to be a part of this group.
Thanks, guys.
Right. Well, just a really big thank you to all of our presenters for taking the time to come, especially folks that came in person. So appreciate it. And this is really helpful conversation for me, just learning, being a little newer to this work, and getting to know the jurisdictions that make up SKHHP. So thank you all so much. And want to acknowledge the time. And I had made a joke that I thought my agenda was a little too ambitious, and I think it may be. So I'm gonna put it to the board to ask if you want to skip the small group discussion or
skip discussion.
Skip the skip the small group discussion. Or I could briefly go over the summary findings at a high level from what you all shared in your survey, which was going to kind of serve a similar purpose of the small group discussion. So you can kind of hear what each other said. Yes.
If we are going to discuss this letter and everybody wants to, or you're asking for us all to sign this, is this, I got a time frame on it?
Yeah, so the question is about a letter,
Just wondering,
the-
I guess, just
yeah.
wondering about switching timing of items, like moving. this
Sure.
around. If there's a-
So the letter does not need to be adopted today. We wanted to just show it to you to see if this might work and we can adopt it next meeting.
Okay.
Didn't want to assume that folks were, 100% on board, but also wanted to share a draft with you as well, just for your consideration. So up to the chair, vice chair, other board members.
Should we skip the group discussion or the breakout discussion and just go to kind of the results that you saw, Claire, of
Yeah.
the survey, and
Sounds
maybe
good.
that can
Yes.
help us keep everything on the agenda.
Yes, sounds good. And my apologies for not allowing you to get in those small group discussions, because I know how much we like those. So at the last meeting, you may recall, you took a survey. Some folks took it between last meeting and this meeting. And there were 3 questions that I just want to go over at a high level, and what we kind of heard from the board. So that first question was question 4. The question was, the executive board identified the following item as a top priority on the 2023 and 2024 work plans. Develop sub-regional housing preservation strategies. What is the outcome you would like to see with regards to a sub-regional affordable housing preservation strategy? So, all right, so just high level summary answers. What I heard from you all is you want a comprehensive understanding of your preservation options. So what is it that folks are doing in this work? We heard from a lot of our city planning staff and others today about what some of those ideas are. But I think, to me, this means we want to know what some of those ideas are. We want to avoid displacement and maintain affordability. There was a important point about maintaining the city's autonomy in this process, and that really means these should be recommendations. These should not be mandates if we're developing this sub-regional housing preservation strategy, and tailored recommendations. So city-specific recommendations were mentioned. Collaboration and resource sharing. So collaborating with local governments, collaborating with SKHHP, collaborating with the housing organizations, the private sector developers, nonprofit developers, to develop the strategy, but also for implementing and getting stakeholders on board. And then preservation for vulnerable populations was mentioned throughout. So to share that. So the next question was, SKHHP staff defines affordable housing preservation as preserving opportunities for permanent affordability, preserving people's ability to stay in their homes, and preserving people's ability to remain in the community. How would you describe the need in your jurisdiction for affordable housing preservation? What is the problem that needs to be solved? So this might sound familiar. This was a similar question that we asked the staff that presented today. So we heard, I heard the need to preserve existing affordable housing and add new market rate housing. So we know there's this tension. We know that we need to preserve what we have, but we also need more housing as well. So there's a balance. And this came up multiple times in the survey answers. And then loss of naturally occurring affordable housing due to redevelopment, rising rents, and physical deterioration. So we heard a lot of that today, all 3 of those concerns as well. And then the risk of redevelopment and displacement. And then all of these populations were specifically called out by at least 1 board member. So low-income seniors, multi-generational households, households near light rail, mobile home park residents, fixed income households, and households living in income restricted units with expiring affordability. And so we heard a lot of that as well today from staff. So I think it feels like we are more on the same page than not. So excited about that. And then the last question asked was, are there neighborhoods, specific populations, or housing types that you would prioritize for preservation? And there was a wide variety of answers to the prioritization question. Everyone has a different focus on the highest priority location or population. Multifamily housing was the one that was mentioned most. Four board members cited that. Mobile homes, 2 jurisdictions mentioned that. Single family residential was mentioned. Seniors, fixed incomes, also had 2 board members mention that. And then just kind of a general, I'm not sure about a specific population, but the locations with the greatest risk of displacement, so however that would be defined, was mentioned twice as well. And then at least one board member mentioned the following. So properties that accommodate larger families, expiring affordability, populations that have been displaced previously through discriminatory practices like redlining, current and future light rail stations, veterans, people with disabilities. So overall, the responses highlight the need for a comprehensive approach to addressing housing preservation in South King County. And this approach should include strategies to protect existing affordable housing, create new affordable housing, and support people who are at risk of displacement. So that is something that we are going to be exploring, I would say, more in the new year than this year, given that we have Housing Capital Fund work to do in our next 2 meetings. But wanted to start this conversation now, since this is a priority of the board. And is, I know, a high priority for next year's work plan as well. So thank you all for taking the time to fill out the surveys and listen to all of our jurisdictions on what's going on across the subregion, and would love to continue this conversation as well. If you're interested sooner than next year as well. So with that, happy to move on to the next agenda topic. Or take any questions or comments.
Questions or comments? Yes, Dana.
Really quick. One of the things that, and it could be because I'm completely obsessed with 1110 and the amount of yeah, not a shocker. But what I heard from nearly every jurisdiction was that we all believe this is going to be a problem. And I guess my plea is, as we head into next legislative session, I think there were a couple of us that spent a ton of time talking about it, but we've got to figure out that collective voice, because it was apparently easy for the legislature to ignore, maybe Nancy and I, as we showed up a million times, but the reality is it's impacting all of us. And I'm concerned we're going to get more of this type of legislation being presented next year, and it's clearly having an impact on all of us. Because, and the other thing that I heard was we have a lot of stock here and we don't have any stock on either end, and that is something I know when I say to legislators, they're like, that's not a real thing. Like, I need more $1 million homes because I don't have any there, and that means that those folks are taking up in the, it's that compression concept, and it doesn't, I don't know, but it's never met with like, oh, that seems like a real problem. And so just reinforcing that we're really all in that same place is going to be super important for us as a group.
Well, and I think what you just said was an excellent point, because absent the $1 million plus homes, people are going to be moving down a level of income, which is going to suppress everyone else. And so it does become a problem everywhere. We may see it first. So I always say we're the canary in the coal mine for a lot of things, South King County especially. But it is going to happen. And I don't want to just be sitting there go, see, I told you so. I want us to be proactive enough that even if we have to just keep banging away at it, that they are going to listen to us and realize that there's more than one answer to this. There has to be. It's not a one size fits all approach, just like with any other issue we have. There are unique differences in each one of our jurisdictions. Newer cities, right, may have challenges that the more established cities don't have, but none of them are any less meaningful or impactful than another. And so I think we just need to make sure that our voices continue to be heard. We asked very specifically to the legislature, could you just please hold off on any more housing legislation for a year? Just to let us see what the impacts are of the legislation you've already passed. That's a big fat no.
Yeah.
It's a, no, we've got to keep going. So.
And we
we'll
had 12
continue to ask.
which was do a housing plan. We all did housing plans and then it was throw that away and let's do 11. And so I think that's just, yeah, it would just be helpful if we could just see what the benefits are of legislation before we add something new on it that could be in conflict with that legislation. I mean, last year, there were bills that were passed that were in conflict with each other, and we were told, figure it out. That's not, I mean, Auburn may figure it out one way, Kent figures it out another, and Covington another, and that's not right. You know, clean up the language so we know exactly what we're supposed to be doing. And send us some money too.
Yeah, the money is definitely the factor that we all need to get behind as well.
Money and.
Well, in implementation, like we get a lot of planning grants and then what? Like the great reports sort of sit on the shelf because there's no money to actually make it happen. I would just say too, I'd be interested, Andrew, like hearing the other tools that could go with 1110 that we, you know, 1110 by itself is just is challenging, but perhaps there's ways to require if it becomes 6 from 1 that it serves larger families or that it remains affordable or whatever. Maybe there's ways to also ask for better clarify what we need.
And just a reminder to the board, so we are still working on the legislative priorities flyer. So we showed that to you last month. You gave us good feedback. So that will come back next month. And, you know, I think part of that, the one item we were advocating for is that funding for all aspects of affordable housing. So it seems like something that can be used as a tool when you are in those meetings, like you're talking about trying to bang down the door to let them know that these are our real needs to start that conversation. And also, you know, happy for Skip to play a role in that if there's a clear way to do that. So maybe that's something we can talk about next month, or if there's broader interest as well from the board. And with that, we have 7 minutes, but that's okay. We can do this. Chair, would you like to move us on to the next item?
Yes, let's move to the pathways to removing obstacles to housing grant and the potential letter that has already been mentioned.
Yes, let me just put the screen on a slide. Okay. So, and just for the board's awareness, we are losing Dana Ralph, we are losing Christina Soltis. So for our board members online,
Councilman Zimmerman had to leave as well.
so he had to leave. So I think we have just quorum 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus Mayor Kelly's online.
Yes.
So we have 6. So please, nobody leave, hang in there with me. So for this item, HUD is making available $85 million to address barriers to affordable housing production and preservation. So this is a very exciting opportunity for us in discussions with King County along with Arch. King County is offering to be the holder of this grant and the contract manager. should we be awarded and provide staffing and resources that would directly benefit South King County cities. So the funds would support staff that would be assigned to support South King County as a sub-region and assist with implementing comprehensive plans, including code updates, analysis, policy development, and more. So I've invited Sunari to come and talk about that, a little bit about that, yes. Okay, great. There's also a letter of support draft that we provided to the board to just glance at if this is something you would be willing to consider to adopt next month, and we could put your signature on it and have a really strong application. So take it away.
Thank you. Yes, and so within the 85 million that HUD is making available, the grant amount to any jurisdiction or partnership is $1 to $10 million, and the grant period is actually pretty long. It's from January 2024 through September 2029. So it allows for a number of years of potential funding in this kind of policy planning area. And so we had been interested in applying in part just out of self-interest. We want to implement some of the things we have in our comprehensive plan for unincorporated King County, and we don't have the resources and the capacity we need today to do it as well as we'd like. So we figured we'd be a stronger applicant if we invited, because one of the things HUD is looking for is scale of impact. So if we partner with SKIP and with Arch and take some of the coordinating responsibility for the places outside that are interested in doing this, we'll have a stronger application. We already have a leg up because the county as a whole is in one of the high priority areas in that we have high housing costs here. I don't know if y'all noticed. So that gives us a leg up in the application round as well. So as Claire mentioned, funding would be to help jurisdictions implement their comprehensive plans, comply with any new state laws such as middle housing, and thinking about really about the affordability components of those things, going towards staff support, consulting pool. We're not looking at a specific strategy that everyone should implement or anything like that. It's more what are the needs of each jurisdiction to advance affordability. So in conversations with Arch, who agreed to issue letters to circulate a letter of support at their meeting earlier this week, one of the things they said is like how to implement middle housing if there's a lot of homeownership associations in your jurisdiction or something like that, and you want to think about the legal issues there, might be something they'd be interested. Folks that are looking at preventing and mitigating displacement, or we could think about manufactured housing preservation. A lot of the issues that came up today, I think, are eligible for additional analysis under this grant. So, you know, also could be things about reducing costs, such as how can we collaborate together? So if multiple jurisdictions are looking at MFTE, could we hire one consultant to do a market analysis for the broader area rather than individually? So yeah, interested in seeing if SKIP is interested in supporting this. Again, we did get the head nod from Arch earlier this week, so we're excited about that. 2 minutes.
Anyone have any thoughts initially on it, supporting? Tracy?
Just clarity. So you're asking for our support for King County to receive this, and then how would it be determined who received this support? So when you talked about planning and
yeah,
so who gets the support?
Yeah, I think we'd have to come up with some sort of application process, but I think we would partner with Claire on that. I think, you know, there's a world in which you say, oh, you could put a person within SKIP, but I think it's administratively maybe more challenging than some of the cities want to take on. I know Bellevue is also like, I'm not sure about that. And so we would definitely just be partnering with Claire to figure out within a South King County kind of bucket of resources how to deploy.
And we've had some preliminary conversations about, you know, maybe Arch gets one specific person that helps the Arch city. So, and it doesn't just have to be through SKIP either. It's South King County that we would get a staff person that any of the cities, any of the planners we could call upon if there are opportunities for collaboration. Like she mentioned, a market analysis on MFTE, you know, and this applies to many people, then that's something that we could request. But, you know, I think the overall takeaway is this would be staff directly for supporting South King County jurisdictions. And
so this 85 million would be directed purely to South County, or that would be divided between
is nationwide.
Okay, that's No, it's like
We wish.
There's 1 to 10 million.
1 to 10 million, so. you know,
available depending on what they
Yeah,
determine.
so what they determine, what we apply for, and Sochi is, who took over my old position as policy lead, is rapidly writing what our outline would be, but I think some of how she writes it is dependent on who's interested in collaborating.
Okay.
But, you know,
Okay.
there's a match requirement. We think we can do the match from within King County resources based on other things we're doing on the topic. But, you know, just kind of the more we have a little bit to ground what might be done with this, the stronger it looks. And that is kind of, but we know we're doing this really fast because HUD, of course, issued it and says it's due, right? Right after that, just once you kind of absorb their 100-page long solicitation.
Okay.
And so there is the draft letter of support. So that would be one of the ways that we can strengthen the application and really, I would say if we want to take advantage of it, we should definitely submit the letter of support.
So would you gather gather signatures and permission to put it on each one? And then would you be able to follow up with a digital copy so that we could either if different people on the council needed to see it or bring it to our consent agenda or something?
Yeah, so typically what we would do is we will gather your electronic signatures and make sure that anyone who wanted to sign on is included. And then once it's finalized, we would send around copy. Or if you need it before it's finalized, is that what you're asking?
No, just trying to get the process in mind, what you would need from me, for example, in my city and what I need from you. So I would just need a follow-up letter with the digital copy for review on senior staff and, you know, the mayor and all that. And then with direction, then I could vote yes, probably next.
So
time.
you need this electronically
Yes.
so that you can run it past.
Yeah,
So
I
we'll
mean, I
send it
can
electronically to
scan this, but-
all of the cities.
Yeah.
We can send this draft today, and I should have done that before the meeting. And the other ask was about the possibility of city-specific letters of support. So if that is possible, that would also strengthen the application. And I know Arch is sending around a template for cities that you could use if that was something you'd be willing to do. So I'll do that. We'll do that as well. So we'll attach this and a template for the
With a
cities.
short explanation, then that would be, then the powers that you can
Yep.
review it, and
Yep.
give me direction.
And you should have that early next week.
All right,
Brian.
Just a comment on procedure. I guess my preference is if this is just a letter of support, seems pretty benign.
Mhm.
You said the same word. In which case, I don't know why you couldn't just sign it.
Right.
If it's consistent with our mission and goals, I don't know why we need to
Have everybody
make a
sign
big
it.
deal about it.
The only
I
thing,
mean, we are assigned as a committee to just give.
No, I mean, we
Say
give
yeah.
support. We say, Claire, we support this letter. Please sign on our behalf. If we want to include the chair as well, but I don't think we need every single person to sign it.
The only thing that it does, if we have individual signatures, is showing, I would say that the cities are represented specifically by name as board members on it, which has some weight, but to your point, administratively, like it is more.
So I guess there's a second reason behind this, and if I think it would be better for my jurisdiction if I'm not signing stuff on Skip's behalf.
Got it.
What if you do the what Brian just suggested, but then you send the template for individual city letters?
Yep.
Would that
That's
provide
what-
the support that you're looking for, that gives the breadth or the depth for the application? My second question is when do you need it?
So, so King County is doing their public comment period starting October 13th. And in theory, we don't have to have it for that public comment period, but it would be nice, but not required. Sochi Makovich told me. And so, but the application is due, hard deadline, I think it's October 30th. So,
so how about we'll do the letter, Dana and I can sign in addition to you, Claire, and then send the city template out. and ask that those signed electronic copies come back to you so we can submit it as a package. How's that work?
Yeah, because otherwise it's redundant.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Super.
All right. Housing Capital Fund application update. I know we are behind. If you can do this in a couple of minutes. There is a sheet in your packet that shows what the current projects, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 projects, totaling obviously more money than we have available, but thank you all for coming and presenting. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, so in your packet, you should have a document we sent last week in your agenda packet. This lists the 7 anticipated projects that we expect to receive applications for the Housing Capital Fund funding, which are due today in 2 hours. So we will know for sure what this slate looks like for the year. For this year's funding round, but wanted to just provide that brief update to you. And Dorsal, you said we had 4 applications already received. 5 now. All right. So we have 5 officially applying. And when we did the math earlier, the requests were about $11 million. And if you recall, we have about 6 million available. And so there will be some challenging decisions for the advisory board and you all to make in the coming months. And just a reminder, so we will be reviewing those applications. I'll be preparing summary memos of each project for you, but this year we are going to be providing the full applications to you should folks want to go into the details. We heard that was of interest last year, so we are using our technology to ensure you're able to do that. We will provide those summary documents of the whole thing for you. That's what we'll go over at our October meeting. Anticipated a recommendation in November. And just for your planning purposes, we are hoping to cancel our December meeting. I heard that was also of interest to allow some breathing space for the end of the year during the holiday period. So with that, also one quick announcement. If you are interested in participating on our advisory board interviews, we are going to be forming a small subgroup to officially interview the candidates. It's going to be I would say it's a 2.5 hour commitment. One time, we're just going to go straight through. And so I have 2 volunteers from the board already. Chair and vice chair have graciously volunteered themselves. So if others are interested, pending calendar availability on whatever date is selected, raise your hand now.
If you need someone, I can help.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian. Anyone else online? Mayor Kelly, I know you're there, but or in the room. If not, that's okay. We could also send out the date of when we have that. And then if folks are available, we could do that.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us. You know, there's always so many great topics for us to talk about, and you can't just really rein in sometimes exciting conversations and great information. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for your participation and your dedication to ensuring that everyone in South King County has the opportunity for affordable housing. We are adjourned.
Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dorsal.
Couple ways to get through it. Without raising too much alarm.
Hi. How are you? I know. It's not terrible.